How's it going, y'all? We're going to go ahead and read this Karl Marx here on, um, this is in the New York Daily Tribune on London, Friday, October 7th, 1853. This is Strikes. It's called Strikes, yeah. It's the third part of this three-part thing he had on this. Earlier we read financial matters, and then before that we read the war question. So let's go ahead and get into strikes. Strikes. In my letter of August 12th, I stated that the master spinners and manufacturers were getting up an association for the purpose of aiding the trade and regulating the excitement among the operatives in the Manchester district. That association was to consist of local associations with a central committee, and that it intended resisting all demands made by associated bodies of mill hands, fortifying the monopoly of capital by the monopoly of combination and dictating terms as an associated body. Now, is it not a very curious fact that the scheme of which informed you about 2 months ago has to this very moment never been alluded to by the London papers, although silently carried out in the meantime, and already doing its work at Preston, Bolton, and Manchester? The London press, it appears, was anxious to withhold the fact from the eyes of the world that the factory lords were systematically arraying their class against the class of labor, and that the successive steps taken by them, instead of being the spontaneous result of circumstances, are the premeditated effects of a deep-laid conspiracy of an organized anti-labor league. This English capitalist league of the 19th century is yet to find its historian, as the French Catholic League did in the authors of the Satire Menapé at the end of the 16th century. The work people, in order to succeed in their demands, must naturally try to keep the one party until the strike of the others has proved victorious. Where this plan is acted upon, the mill owners combine to close all their mills, and thus to drive their hands to extremities. The Preston manufacturers, as you know, were to begin the game. 13 mills are already closed, and at the expiration of another week, every mill is to be shut up, throwing out of work more than 24,000 men. The weavers have addressed a memorial to the masters, soliciting an interview, or offering to refer the matters in dispute to arbitration. But their request was rejected, as the Preston weavers were assisted by penny collections from the operatives of the surrounding districts from Stalybridge, Oldham, Stockport, Bury, Withnell, Blackburn, Church Parish, Action, Irwell Vale, Enfield, Burnley, Colney, Backup, etc. The men, having discovered that the only means of resisting the undue influence of capital was by union among themselves, the Preston factory lords, on their part, have sent out secret emissaries to undermine the means of succor for the men on strike, and to induce the mill owners of Burnley, Colney, Backup, etc., to close their establishments and to cause a general cessation of labor. In certain places, as at Enfield, the overlookers have been induced to inform their masters, who had taken part in forwarding the movement, and accordingly a number of penny collectors have been discharged, while the Preston men are exhorted by the work people of the surrounding districts to remain firm and united. The Preston masters meet with an immense applause from the others' manufacturers, being extolled as the true heroes of the age. At Bury, matters are taking a similar turn as at Preston. At Bolton, the bed quilt makers having lots cast to decide which of them were to begin striking, the masters of the whole trade at once closed their mills. Besides the simultaneous closing of mills, other means of combination are resorted to. At Cayley, for instance, the weavers of Mr. Loon struck for an advance of wages, the principal cause of their turn out being his giving less than was received by the weavers of Mr. Anderton at Bingley. A deputation of the weavers having asked for an interview with Mr. Loon and proceeded to his lodgings, they had the door politely shut in their faces. But a week afterwards, Mr. Anderton's work people were informed by notice that a reduction would be made in the wages of his weavers, of third per piece, and of his woolcombers, 1 farthing per pound. Mr. Loon and Mr. Anderton, having in the meantime concluded an alliance offensive and defensive, with a view to fight the weavers of one by pulling down the wages of the other. Thus, it is supposed, Mr. Loon's weavers will be driven to submission, or Mr. Anderton's weavers to a turnout. The additional weight of another turnout doing away with all chance of support. Both sets will bend to a general reduction, In other instances, the masters tried to enlist the shopkeepers against the workingmen. Thus Mr. Horsfall, the coal king of Derby, Mainpit, when in consequence of a reduction of wages, his hand struck, went to all the butchers, bakers, and provision dealers of the neighborhood, the colliers trade with, to prevail on them, not to let his men have anything on credit. In all localities where the Association for Regulating the Excitement among the Operatives exists, the associated masters have pledged themselves to heavy fines in case of any individual member violating the status of their league, or yielding to the demands of the hands. At Manchester, these fines amount to 5,000, at Preston to 3,000, at Bolton to 2,000, etc. There is one feature which above all distinguishes the present conflict from past ones, at former periods, as in 1832, 1839, 1840, and 1842. A general holiday, as it was called, viz., a general and simultaneous stopping of labor throughout the whole kingdom, was a favorite idea with the operatives, and the great object they aimed at. This time it is capital which threatens a general withdrawal. It is the masters who endeavor to bring about a general closing of bills. Do you not think, if successful, it may prove a very dangerous experiment? It is their intention to drive the English people to an insurrection of June 5th, in order to break their rising spirit and to lay them prostrate for a series of years to come. At all events, we cannot too closely watch the symptoms of the civil war preparing in England, especially as the London press intentionally shuts its eyes to great facts, while it diverts its readers with descriptions of such trifles as the banquet given by Mr. Titus Salt, one of the factory princes of Yorkshire, at the opening of his palace mill, where not only local aristocracy were regaled, but his hands too. Quote, prosperity, health, and happiness to the working class, end quote, was the toast proposed by him, as the public is told by the metropolitan press. But it is not told that some day afterwards his Maureen weavers received notice of another reduction in their wages from 2/3 to 2/1. If this means either health or prosperity to the Maureen weavers, writes one of his victims to the People's Paper, I, for one, do not want it. You will perhaps have seen from the Times that a Miss Macdonald of Knoyart Glengarry has, in imitation of the Duchess of Sutherland, undertaken to clear her estates in order to replace men by sheep. The People's Paper, informed by a correspondent on the spot, gives the following graphic description of this Malthusian operation. This lady had a number of cottagers on her domains, many of whom were unable to pay their rents, some being considerably in arrears, as we are told. She therefore ordered them all off, and drove them to take refuge in the woods and caves, where they have since been lurking, or rather dying, while Miss Macdonald's horses have been warmly bedded in secure and comfortable dwellings. She at the same time offered them a free passage to Canada, passage money being their little stocks, they having no stock whatever to sell except the clothes they stand in, a broken table, or a remutic cat. Finally, she forgave them the arrears. She could not get, this is called noble generosity. So this is back to Marx. Such ejections appear to be again the order of the day throughout the Highlands. Thus, at least, we are informed by Sir Charles Forbes, a Highland laird, writing to the Times. So this is Charles Forbes. That sheep farms are now becoming so valuable that it will pay our English sheep farmers to hire sheep at any time, and to pay for the removal of all who stand in their way. Okay, yeah, so that's the whole of that. That's strikes. So this is Karl Marx in the New York Daily Tribune in 1853, on London, Friday 7th, October 7th, 1853. Thank you all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, Medium, all of these. Marxist Saw, go follow me there. Y'all have a great day, and Lodada Goy.